In this lesson, we will explain how the United States confronted the difficult task of forming the new government, show how the political ideas of Hamilton and Jefferson differed, and describe how political differences evolved into a two-party system. Washington heads the new government. President Washington transforms the ideas of the Constitution into a real working government. The new government begins to take shape as the Judiciary Act of 1789 is passed. This act created the Supreme Court, the 3 circuit courts, and the 13 district courts. It also allows for state court decisions to be appealed to the federal court level. Washington shapes the executive branch. Washington is elected first president of the United States in 1780. The executive branch is made up of the president and the vice president. Congress creates the State Department, the War Department, and the Treasury Departments. Alexander Hamilton becomes the Secretary of the Treasury, and he is pictured here. Washington adds the office of Attorney General, and these department heads make up Washington's cabinet. Pictured here in the picture is Washington and his cabinet. You have George Washington. You have Henry Knox, who is Secretary of War. You have Alexander Hamilton as Secretary of the Treasury. You have Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State. And you have Edmund Randolph as Attorney General. Hamilton and Jefferson's ideas about politics and about economics conflicted. Hamilton wanted a strong central government that was led by the wealthy and the educated. Jefferson wanted a strong state government that was led by the people's participation. Alexander Hamilton had the support of the northern part of the United States, while Jefferson had the support of the South and West. Hamilton's economic plan. The United States, after the American Revolution, owed millions of dollars to foreign countries and to private citizens. Hamilton's plan was to pay the foreign debt, issue new bonds, and for the federal government to take on the debt that the states had. Some southern states had already paid their debts and therefore were against raising taxes to pay for the northern debt. Alexander Hamilton, part of his economic plan was to create a national banking system. So he proposes the Bank of the United States. This bank is to be funded by the government and by private investors. There is a disagreement between Hamilton and Jefferson and Congress whether there is actually authority to establish the national bank, which begins the debate over the strict and loose interpretation of the Constitution. We'll investigate that idea more in class. To compare the views of Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, we can look at this graphic. Alexander Hamilton was for a strong central government. He was a loose constructionist. He wanted to have closer ties to Great Britain. He wanted to see commercial development, especially factories, for economic independence. He was fearful of a total democracy, and he put his faith in the wealthy classes. Thomas Jefferson, on the other hand, was for a strong state government. He wanted closer ties to France. He stressed agriculture, farming, and international trade as the basis for the economy. He had faith in the common man and was fearful of giving the wealthy too much power. And he was a strict constructionalist. The District of Columbia. To win Southern support for his debt plan, Hamilton suggests a deal. In order to get the national bank passed, he suggests that in return he would move the nation's capital from New York into the South. Jefferson agrees, and Washington, D.C. is planned on a grand scale and becomes the government seat and the capital by 1800. Because of the split between Hamilton and Jefferson, you have the creation of the first political parties. The split in Washington's cabinet leads to their creation. And this begins the two-party system in the United States, where two major parties compete for power in the government. The two first political parties are the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. Federalists were led by Alexander Hamilton. They were for a strong central government led by industry and led by the wealthy. They wanted the economy to emphasize manufacturing, shipping, and trade. They were for a loose interpretation of the Constitution. They favored the national bank. They favored protective tariffs, and they were pro-British. The Democratic Republicans were led by Thomas Jefferson. They were for strong state governments led by the common people. They emphasized agriculture and farming as most valuable. They had a strict interpretation of the Constitution, opposed the national bank, opposed protective tariffs, and were pro-French. The Whiskey Rebellion. A protective tariff is an import tax on goods that are produced overseas to make them more expensive so that people would buy American goods. An excise tax is a tax charged on a product's manufacture, sale, or distribution. In 1794, farmers in Pennsylvania refused to pay an excise tax on whiskey. They revolted, they beat up federal marshals, and they threatened secession. This is the first opportunity for the federal government to show that it can enforce the laws that it creates by sending in the militia, led by Alexander Hamilton, and scattering the rebels without a single loss of life. The Whiskey Rebellion was a success for the American government in showing